Action.
All right, welcome everyone to Card Fight Vision. I'm Peter. This is, of course, Charlie. And for the first time in any of our videos or streams, here's our stats guy, Core, showing up to give us some info.
Yes, and we have quite a bit of info. We have, obviously, Vision Weeklies that have just finished for time being. And we have the Team Battle League, which was our quarterly seasonal major. I hope we're going to do those as quarterly thing going forwards. So, there's a lot to talk about. Let's move on and begin with February 27th. And the story
26.
26. Yeah. I know what's going on.
Top right of visual. I'll tell you the date.
So yeah, February 26th. And the story of Jared Plays. So what happened here, Peter?
Well, on this first one, Jared Plays was using Gavril with the Hamiel build and pretty much swept the tournament. Only dropped a single game, and that was in top cut, so it was a best of 3 anyways. So it didn't really matter. It was just a little scratch. Meanwhile, Dying Baka got second with Prisms, and Royal Lover, that is their real name, got third with Gurgit. And we had a pretty diverse top 8 there, actually.
We didn't have any duplicates amongst the top 8 at all.
Yeah.
And this top 8 also shows like a couple of potential meta contenders, such as Rose, Spectral Duke, Hanzo, and well, then there's the other rogue decks, which I would say are Thavis, Gaia here, and Hanzo. But I mean, the other 5 have a possibility of contending for being in the meta. And also as well with Jared Plays, he was the only Angel Feather in this tournament at all. So one Angel Feather in the tournament got first place, and that was Jared.
100% conversion, boys. On the other side of things, let's not mention the Hanzo to Shinko. And furthermore, let's move on and get rid of the evidence. The 27th now, daytime. Same weekend. 2 of the same people making top 3 with a grudge match.
Yeah, so here in this top 3, essentially the decks just rotated counterclockwise from the day before's tournament. Royal Lover being in first, Jared being in second, KCBC being in third, Gurgit with being in first, Gabber on second, and Prism in third. So just really the same top 3, but they switched their spots.
The fact that it stayed the same 3 top decks, that's crazy, especially because 2 of those were the same players. Like, that just shows that it's not just the decks. It's also the players that are, pushing those decks to their limits.
We do see some repeats in top 8. For example, the Thavis Lambros, Gaia, Gurguit, Prism, Gavriel. But we do have some new contenders as well. Himiko, Yggdrasil, I believe, Chelsea, Nightmare Dolls, and Vanquisher, which I honestly forgot was a deck.
Yeah, it happens.
I'm just going to have to double check the library on that one. I'm not sure if it exists. But moving on to March 12th, night tournament, 27 players, and Bermuda Triangle, again, in the top cut. 2 different decks this time. Prism in first, Melody in second, and then we have a bit of an oddity in third. Anyone able to enlighten us on that one?
Yeah, that was an Astral Poets deck, which you don't really see that much because outside of getting the new Eoanasis Dragon, they didn't really get many updates for the past year, which is showing that the deck has a decent foundation to work on and that Zero Ricardo definitely knows how to work this deck, even with a bit of a straightforward game plan.
I mean, I would like to argue with the new support that they got just made the deck that much more consistent at killing. Just because you can search out Valkyrion with the dragon just right away. 1 counterblast. You get Valkyrion and you also get a force marker, which is very strong for 1 counterblast. Plus also it acting as a PG essentially. in hand, and you essentially have just 8 Sentinels in your deck at that point if you're in 4 Dragons. So I just think they've gotten very strong support recently, and I mean that we're seeing the roots of that with a 3rd place from Zero Ricardo.
Yeah. Showing that the deck just needed a little bit of a consistency boost. It had a very strong base that just needed to be built upon, and Zero Ricardo was able to really make it work.
Yeah. But it didn't show up next time. What we got instead, as a Genesis in the top 8, was Regalia. But it didn't make top 3.
In first place this time, Royal Lover had gotten first place at the previous one that they made top 3 at, but this time this is their second first place of this month's worth of tournaments. So that's always interesting to see players sort of show up in most of the top 3s and also get first place quite a few times.
What's interesting is that I think this is what he played. Royal Lover is playing the Ezel engine as well inside of Gurguit, and playing the new addition to the Gurguit deck, Edmund. So essentially a second copy of Aglavale, but also gets 10 extra shield.
Indeed, see Royal Lover get another top again with Gold Paladin. Never seen him use Royal Paladin. But again, it's Gurguit and not Spectral Duke, even though Spectral Duke seems to be the more popular choice, probably because it's new. Results-wise, we actually see it's Gurguit in the top, even with the loss of previous best friend.
Rest in peace, Percival.
Sash Baker taking second with Prisms, and Atomus taking third with Sentry Guard Dragon.
And yeah, that's crazy that the graph is just so skewed in Bermuda Triangle's favor that you can literally see half of it is just one image, to the point where you could get almost a full body shot or a full torso shot of Vert.
What's even more amazing is that 7 players brought Bermuda to this tournament, and every other clan has either 1, 2, or 3 representatives. Bermuda just has 7.
Yeah, and that certainly has some impact on the next graph to show, but first, we've got to talk about how we've got this Luard, who apparently can still deliver when necessary, and Night Rose deck.
2 Granblue decks, actually, with Ghosties, with, if I believe, a Ghosties Night Rose variant specifically. So that means that Granblue actually had a much higher percentage of the people that were playing in that tournament, because that was 2/3 of the Granblue players versus roughly 1/2 of the Bermuda Triangle players in the top 8.
Yep.
What I find even more interesting is that a deck you wouldn't even expect in top 8, Malkuth.
Of 2 Angel Feathers. Makes you wonder if the other was also Malkuth or actually Gavriel. But for now, the aggregate of all the representation from all 6 Vision bi-weeklies for the Clan Selection 2 meta period. And Bermudas have taken off.
Mm-hmm.
More than,
Yeah.
well, not quite more than double because we've got decimal places, but about double the representation of the next most popular choice. So,
And one of the interesting things about that is that Bermuda's is one of those decks that just has so many variants. They give so many different ways to play the clan, and a lot of them are pretty strong too. Not only is there the Prisms, but there's also Melody, there's Highlander, there's Ange. There's really just so many ways to play this that it's honestly not quite accurate to portray it all as one clan, because they all play kind of differently.
I mean, in the Vision community, I know a fair bit of people who do main Bermuda Triangle, so it kind of makes sense that Bermuda Triangle is the most played deck, just because of how many variants there are, how many people in our community actually like playing Bermuda, and also all the new support that came with it that fueled very, very many builds. That was really bad wording. Cut that part. As far as I know, there's like 3 or 4 main builds. There's Prisms, there's Highlander, which some would argue the best deck, not consistency, but power level, in case like you hit those grade 4s that can help you pop off. There is Anj, of course, and there's also Anj Highlander hybrid, which Anj is basically used to abuse Highlander cards, and you can get your deck to Highlander to abuse those cards even more. So stuff like Betty, Cute Tire, you usually use all this stuff with Anj to cheat out stuff like Pearl Sisters to get that permanent 2-crit body on board. And there's just a lot of different variants of these decks that are very interesting to see play.
So, matchups for the weeklies is actually what's next. And we have Bermuda's win rates first. Mostly represented by Prisms. Mostly favourable win rates, with just about equal to Genesis. What do you think is giving Genesis that little bit of an edge versus the other clans that it's encountering?
I think it might be because there are just some very strong, dedicated players for Genesis that really know what they're doing. And because the deck can just put out so much power very quickly, especially because of those little small updates that helped boost the consistency, it makes it so that sometimes the Prism deck doesn't really get a chance to shine.
That in addition to the other build that Genesis has. So of course the main one is Astro Poets, but there's always that other build that got discovered around the time Gregor got released, which is Himiko Yggdrasil, which with a new promo that can match the trigger effects that have been put onto one of your other rear guards, that in conjunction with Yggdrasil restanding leaves for like 3 attacks at 4 or 5 crit to your opponent's face. And so with that kind of power and that many crits on turn 3, if you're going second, of course, it just leads to a very fast game. If you don't survive, you lose. If you do survive, you essentially win at that point. And so with 2 fast decks from Genesis, it's either going to be you win right away or you lose right away.
To move on, we have Gold Paladin, which was mostly represented by Gurgrit rather than Spectral Duke, which is surprising. But also, no Bermuda Triangle mention on this one because we already know how that matchup plays out. However, no double figure matchups here amongst our bi-weeklies for Gold Paladin in the remaining most frequent. But win rates are all over the place. Never lost to Aquaforce in 6 encounters.
Yeah, that's something.
Struggling slightly versus Granblue, but then versus Genesis and Angel Feather, really struggling. Genesis, we've just spoken about. The same things which apply to the Genesis matchup for Bermuda, they're also going to apply here. And that brings us to the third most played clan in the weeklies, which is Granblue, mostly represented by Night Rose, with some additions from clan selection. Some of them are using the full ghosty package in a tech. Some of the Night Roses are only using part of the ghosty package in tech. But looking at the matchups, it doesn't have a lot of matchups before it really starts wearing thin. But favourable to Angel Feather, even to Genesis, even to Oracle Think Tank, and slightly favoured versus Royal Paladin. But the main thing that we really want to be looking at is Angel Feather. Given that Hamiel has Guard Restrict, which blocks away Sentinels, and Granblue is a Protect deck, how is it that Granblue is able to hold Gabriel Hamiel off? Or are these wins because it encountered not the Hamiels, but rather the Malkuth Melex?
We actually did see in some of the tournaments, we saw Granblue actually going against Angel Feather, where, especially in Top Cut, I remember distinctly one of them where Granblue lost game 1, but then sort of saw what they had to do in order to stop that situation from happening, because Granblue has such a high damage output, or not even a high damage output, but they can put so much threat on the board that they can make it so the Hamiel deck doesn't really have time to get started.
They can also filter pretty hard for just guard pieces, right? If they're probably using the crit sentinel. Once they milled enough, they can just spam greed shades, drop the cards that don't need in their hand, and just either get heals or the crit sentinel back to hand. So they just stockpile.
So,
Oh wait, scratch the crit sentinel thing. Hamiel remove sentinels, huh?
yeah.
Yeah, you're not guarding that with Crit Sentinels because they're still Sentinels. We finally come to our Team League information, and in the Team Battle League, every person competing is able to bring whatever deck they want to battle that is fought. But every encounter of the two teams, people can bring whatever clan so long as they do not match another player at the time on the same side. They can also swap out their decks in between fights, so they don't have to use, say, Nova's here and Nova's here. This did mean that over the weeks of the Team Battle League, we saw the meta start to be more fine-tuned and developed. People came in early on with some interesting ideas, which didn't maintain, but we did see some gravitation towards 6 clans in particular. And, well, how did we end up in this situation?
I, for one, welcome our new Bermuda Triangle overlords.
That makes one of us.
What's interesting here is that the gold paladin decks that are being played, most of them aren't Gurguit. Most of them are Spectral Duke, to be more specific. And Spectral Duke seems to be taking quite a few matchups against these top decks as well, just based off the early rush that it has and just the potential rush it has later on once it reaches 4 damage. And players have started catching on to how this deck functions versus how Gurguit functions. Seems like they've taken more of a liking to it, which is why we've been seeing more Spectral Dukes over the month rather than Gurguit.
And we have seen some really strong domination from Bermuda here as well. It's not just that it's the most used, it's the most used and has the highest win rate. And to have both of those be true is an impressive feat for a deck.
That's absolutely wild, because that win rate is also alarmingly higher than other ones. Like, it's a slightly higher than 55% win rate for Gold Paladin, and then for Bermuda Triangle, that's a nearly...
Bermuda's clocks in at 62, 61 and a few decimals, but don't ask me what the decimals are. But, oh well, moving on. So, because we had the Team Battle League, we actually have far many more games recorded than initially led to believe with just the bi-weeklies. And this is where we really see just how powerful the Bermuda Triangle clan is as a whole. Again, mostly represented by Prisms. There's some Greedlander in there. I know that's a premium deck name, but it applies here as well. But we actually have a full list of matchups in double figures. 58, 45, 42, 36. These are numbers we can actually work with, and whilst they're not scientifically efficient enough, because there's still too much margin for error, as far as tournaments go, it covers more games than you're going to have to worry about. So we have Advantaged versus Gold Paladin, Advantaged versus Angel Feather versus Granblue, and then what happened with Sentry Guard and Royal Paladin here? Anyone got any answers?
I have absolutely no idea. I've watched a few Prism versus Royal Paladin games. All I can say is that the Bermuda Triangle player just bricked. That's all I can say. Nothing else happened in those games. I guess their brick rate against Royal Paladin is pretty bad.
Could
You
build
just
a
put their
house.
deck down. Well, guess I lose.
It's fun.
But what about Gold Paladin? Yeah, Gurguit is still the image here, but as Dweep has already mentioned, as Charlie has already mentioned, in the Team Battle League, Gold Paladin was actually more Spectral Duke than it was Gurguit. And versus Angel Feather, it was a complete neck and neck. Genesis is punishing gold somewhat heavily.
Mm-hmm.
Granblue also coming in and just going, not today. You're not shining the sun in these steps. But then Royal Paladin again showing up. But at least this time the result is a bit more expected. 63% win rate for Gold Paladins versus Royals. And don't expect Shadow Paladins to show up on any of these. They got gutted every single time they showed up. Because I lied. Shadow Paladins did show up eventually. But only because it had more encounters versus Angel Feather than most others.
Mm-hmm.
And that is after taking into account that we're not repeating the Bermuda Triangle matchups and the Gold Paladin matchups. 28% win against Shadow Paladins is actually quite the opposite. But this is the only matchup amongst those top decks which Shadow seems to be favouring. In fact, in general here, 185 wins, 162 losses. Angels is not looking as dominant as first led to believe.
That's interesting, actually, because the fact that it's that close of a win rate is very interesting, because I guess it shows that the deck is sort of one of those ones where you either win very hard or you lose catastrophically. And it also is sort of a knowledge check sometimes. Sort of a, if you don't really know this matchup, you might just give them what they want exactly. But if you know how to play around it, you can sort of get things to work a little bit easier. You can sort of conserve your hand, use your perfect guards or sentinels in general in easier ways, and then, or just discard them if you have discard costs, and then just keep your big shield cards in hand for a while.
But, anyone want to say tier 2?
I mean, all I'll say is that it's still toxic. Okay, I mean, I don't think anybody wants to get hit by a 90k 5-crit Hamule on turn 2, so...
You got a point there. You can't keep taking such a beating and living to tell a tale. But, I think it's about time we round this up, and those are your top 6 decks. Those are how they did versus everything in the pool. And early on, I do want to say I did see people bringing Link Joker mainly to deal with Angel Feather. They were bringing Chaos Brant specifically, as was on my radar. But it didn't work out well for them. You'd have thought it would. But no, apparently having the ability to corrupt Angel Feather's triggers didn't really much matter. But if you're going into Springfest coming up, you might want to have a look at the greens and blues here. And the more greens and blues you have on that horizontal line, the better that clan in general is performing. And with Springfest coming up, that's going to be something of high interest to you. You'll note that we have a lot of single figure encounters on the top graph. It happens. You can't expect all these decks to have enough use that we've got double figure references on all of them, and some permutations never happened at all. A lot of the missing permutations aren't even included because certain clans just didn't encounter each other beyond just these 6 not encountering every clan.
I think this data just speaks for itself. These top 6 decks, these clans, these are just the most played clans, of course. But just looking at this data, I think it's pretty self-explanatory as long as you understand what the graphs are saying.
And any of the competitive players that are out there and watching this, you'll see this, you'll know how to use this. I trust you with that. But if that is all, I believe we have a wrap, and we'll see you next time. But we do have some closing announcements before then. For that, Weeb, you're up.
So we have 2 events coming up besides the Team Battle League finals that are also coming up, but I guess I'll start with that first. So Team Battle League Finals, streaming on twitch.tv/cardfightvision, be the April 10th and 11th. This will be a double elimination bracket with all of top 8, and they do get a prize if they get first place. They get a very big pot of cash. So you get to watch them duke it out for that. That'll be streamed on our channel, and they'll be starting around, I think it's 2 p.m. UTC, Universal Time Code. So just convert that to whatever your time zone is, and that's when we start. Then we also have Remote Fight. We have a Remote Fight tournament coming up on the weekend after the championship tournament for Team Battle League, which is going to be on April 17th. It's going to be a one-day event, only standard, as clan selection released this week, I believe, at the time of recording this. So you'll be able to test out your clan selection stuff in this tournament. We will be limiting participants just because of the number of judges that we have. And we're also collaborating with DF a bit. So you might see him playing in the tournament if you do compete. And then Vision Cross Circuit. This is a thing that we've been working on for essentially just this whole entire year. This will be starting on May 1st, I believe. Let me just check that again.
May 1st
Yes.
is correct. And you know what? Stay tuned for a trailer for that one, because I'm pretty sure Shinko's going to be working on something.
Yeah, we're going to have a trailer for VCC, but essentially it is a 3-week qualifier event to qualify for the final event for a cash prize to top 3, plus some extra goodies from our sponsor over at Conroe Company. So if you want some of those goodies, if you want some cash, think about playing in VCC. Qualifiers will be free and finals will have an entry fee. So even if you don't make it in through qualifiers, you can pay your way into VCC. The cash will be dependent on the entrance, how many entrants we have in the finals. So if you want to support the pot, make sure to enter, and you might have a chance to win some cash.
Peter?
Make sure to check our socials on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at cardfights. We also have our own Discord server, which we flashed on the screen somewhere. I don't know where. Editor, please. Thank you. Join our Discord for any future tournaments, as we do host bi-weeklies, as mentioned in the beginning of this video. And we hope to see you next time on the next Cardfight Vision video, whenever that comes out. I don't know when it is.
Yep. See you all
Hey.
next time.
Fake Solemn, can we get a chow?
Oh, yes. And until next time, ciao.